kind of seems like a big deal, right? I know we have all these other things going on, but that seems like a really big deal. Joining me now, Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk. Okay, Lisa, well, our two biggest enemies on the world stage got together and had a little powwow today. Why?
Because they can. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't invite Iran's regime to the mix, but they'll probably invite him at the next gathering. Because they can. That's the short of it, and that's the most important takeaway here, is that weak foreign policy has consequences. This is the image of the consequence of weak foreign policy. What China and Russia, and of course I will add Iran's regime, and you can add North Korea to the list as well, have decided is that they don't need the United States, that they will work around the sanctions, that they will work around the isolation, and they have each other. So we have effectively pushed them into each other's laps. They're working well together, and their most important, I would say, their priority is to really stick it to the Biden administration to let them know. So these optics are not accidental. They're getting together both militarily, they're working together economically, they are selling weapons to each other, and no accidents.
Lisa, I guess, how strong are they together? I know that's kind of a lame, open-ended question, but I want to know, if I'm looking at an Iran, Russia, China, North Korea alliance, I know North Korea is a bit of a turd, but do they together have enough to do some serious things? That sounds pretty formidable to me, but I don't.
You know what? If you look at the very least, right, the minimum here is that they help each other get off the hook. So when we try to, for example, isolate Russia and try to punish them with economic sanctions because of what they're doing in Ukraine, while we give billions and billions of dollars and military equipment to the Ukrainians, what China does is let the Russians off the hook for that. What the Iran regime is doing is selling weapons to Russia then. So what they're basically doing is canceling out what the United States is hoping to do. So what ends up happening here is that we will not see the results we want to see in the Ukraine war. So at the very, very least, we've wasted all this money by putting it into Ukraine and providing them with aid, while Russia is not getting the message. Look, sanctions always come with some sort of behavioral change that we can expect from the other party, right? So when we put the sanctions on Russia or on China or on Iran's regime or Venezuela or North Korea, it comes with that, we need you to do this, and then we will remove the sanctions, because it's some sort of change that we expect and need in terms of national security and global security, etc. In the case of Russia, what we've done is put these sanctions on them, but they are either not well enforced or now being undone by the Chinese and Iran's regime, who are then stepping in to fill that void. What we could effectively have done is to put sanctions on our enemies and then enforce them properly so that they are not able to move around them and evade them the way that our enemies have been able to do.
Lisa, okay, something that got overlooked is Iran and Saudi Arabia, China brokering a deal with them. Now, I would be lying if I told you I was an expert, but I do know enough to know those two, oftentimes for religious reasons, have been at each other's throats for a long time. Is this something that we should be concerned about?
Absolutely. This is it was a very concerning piece of news, right? We were actually, all the people who are studying this region had all eyes on Saudi Arabia. We thought the next news out of Saudi Arabia would be that they are adding themselves on to the Abraham Accords and normalizing relations with Israel, because that was the way that the Saudis were headed. And why do I say that? Not because they have fallen in love with Zionism and Israel, but because the enemy of my enemy, being Iran's regime, is my friend. So if they are both trying to combat the growth of Iran's regime in the region, which they are, well, the Saudis and the Israelis have much to do to work together, and they have met in recent months to normalize relations. Then what happened overnight to cause the Saudis to move over and try and normalize relations with Iran's regime? Well, the Chinese really sweetened the deal. What the Chinese were able to do is to step in, which would have been the role of the United States, make the United States look completely irrelevant in the Middle East, and say, look, I know Saudi Arabia and Iran. I know you guys are not buddies by any means. For 40 years plus, you guys have been rivals in the region. One being Sunni, one being Shiite. It doesn't mean you have to be best friends, but right now it behooves both of you to have economic opportunity to cooperate with one another. And me, being China, I will be the godfather. I will bless you both equally. So come to the table. And that's exactly what Saudi Arabia did. Saudi Arabia is looking for opportunity, and they have gotten plenty of opportunity by becoming closer to China. And now through this deal, will have opened up themselves to potential with Iran as well. Again, biggest loser in this deal was the United States. It was a big stain on our foreign policy and a big message to the White House. And the biggest winner on the opposite side was Iran's regime. Completely let them off the hook economically. For 6 months, the people of Iran have been on the streets protesting. That is the Achilles heel of this regime, to have so much chaos on the streets and so much disenchantment among the people. Of course, there are sanctions on them. There's a lot of scrutiny on the and a lot of international attention on Iran's regime for these protests, for the brutal way that they have been cracking down on these protests. But they just got themselves another lifeline through this deal.
Lisa, I appreciate you. Come back soon.